Welcome to Police K9 Radio. Rich, what's going on?
We're 2 weeks into the basic. That's going on. I know. Well, I guess you just finished week one, and we were out there last week. And I think on day 1 and 2, we were kind of both slamming our heads into the wall and like, is this ever going to happen? And then by Friday, started to have some successes. And I think it's we're like that every time a basic starts, where we're like, fuck, man, can these guys like work a leash and a dog? And it's a mess. And then we get frustrated, and then it all starts to come together.
It is so awkward in the beginning. I have to take a deep breath just watching them with the long lines. We had the long line and the back tie, and then it took like 5 minutes to get them untied, and then they got them tangled up again within like 10 seconds, and then another 2 minutes of fiddle fucking around with the lines, and it's painful. But overall, man, we got some really nice dogs. I think we got 10 in this class. It's our biggest class ever. We keep it moving. We got 3 stations going at a time. Quality stuff. The handlers seem good. They're right where they should be for week one. And I tell every handler day one, I'm like, this is going to be one of the most hardest things you have done in law enforcement. And for some of them, probably in their entire life. And we go, yeah, okay. Yeah. And then by the end of the week, they're just like frazzled, right? But that's the process. So, but overall, like really good dogs. A couple of your dogs are in there doing really well, and great handlers. So it's a good time so far.
Yeah, and we're going to jump right into this. Within that class already, we're overlaying tone. It's always been your thought that the dogs need to understand e-collar from day one. I know there's a lot of groups out there that won't even let their guys have an e-collar. There's the mindset in some people that e-collar should only be used as a last-ditch effort to get some kind of control out of your dog. You've never been that way. And then with Eric Stanbro, who we have on today, we've actually started implementing the tone and working that, and we're using it a lot, and it's working out really well.
We're basically, the instructors have the e-collar for the first 2 to 3 weeks. So, and we kind of relate when we're doing it, and then we're going to do another class. We've already gone over e-collar with all the handlers just to make sure they don't bring it in on bark mode, or they know how to have it turned on, how to have it on. But then we go in a little more in depth week 4 when they actually start taking over the collar. And we found by the end of the class, like it's pretty seamless. I just can't imagine nowadays, and you guys tell me, I can't imagine going 10-8 without having a goddamn e-collar on my dog. Like I just can't fathom that, right? Like, unless you can guarantee your dog's going to call off 100% of the time, or out 100% of the time, or down 100% of the time, not to train handlers up front to use these tools and have them go 10-8 without these tools, I think we're doing them a disservice.
Yeah, let's introduce Eric, and we can pick his brain on that a little bit. But I'm with you. It doesn't make any sense. It's like giving your guy, a wheel gun, or a Dodge Diplomat to go do patrol in, or like, hey, we're not going to let you use a computer, because it's too easy. You're going to rely on the computer. Yeah, I am. I'm going to rely on the computer to write my report because it's stupid to write one with a pencil. Like all of that doesn't make any sense. But anyway, quick introduction. Obviously, everybody that's watching this knows Eric Stanbro from Working Dog Radio, Vaness K9, and Ridgeside K9, Ohio. Eric, thanks for coming on.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me, guys. I never get to record these at 12:30 in the afternoon here.
When do you guys do yours?
7 or 8:30 at night Eastern, usually.
Okay. Yeah. So. Also host a Working Dog Radio. You forgot that, Rich.
He put it on there.
No, that's the first thing I said.
Oh, you got it in there? Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, the reason why we're doing this, because again, friggin' 4 years ago, or how long have you been doing that, Eric?
6.
6 years?
6 years. February of 18.
Yeah. So 4.5, 5 years ago, sitting out in my backyard listening to you going, that's fucking good shit.
Yeah.
I want to get involved in this. I want to talk to some of these people.
Do it.
Yeah. So thank you for that. But yeah, let's talk e-collar. What are your thoughts on what I just said, Eric, on the whole, because it's probably the same out there where a lot of trainers are, that's advanced. You're going to break your dog with it. Like, try that a year from now. Or we've heard this like, oh, well, that's for the problem dogs. Or we've heard if you train them properly, you don't need a damn e-collar. Those arguments are less and less, but they're still out there. What do you say to those people?
Yeah. So, and I've said this a lot of times, man. In my old department where I was a canine handler, we had one e-collar and one prong collar.
And everybody
shared
it.
The e-collar and the prong collar, right? So, like, if your dog wasn't going to out or recall, go get the e-collar. And I was like, fuck, I don't even have any gas for that thing. I don't know how to use it. You know what I mean? I don't know what I'm doing. Or a prong collar for obedience type stuff. And but they didn't know how to use it. I mean, you can burn dogs off on out a lot of times, but like they would send a dog down for the recall and just smoke them on the e-collar. It was a dog trust on 127, no context, no leash, no nothing, and then wonder why the dog ran past the decoy, out the gate, into the woods, and into the housing project.
Still looking for him.
Yeah, we had to go find him, right? So that was always the mentality here, and it's still a huge mentality around this country. I travel all over the country teaching e-collar seminars and correcting mistakes and you know, changing some things. But, and I didn't know, I'll be honest with you. So I worked 4 dogs. I think my last dog had an e-collar. Like, it still wasn't like, I mean, oh, it did. Yeah, we did, because I was teaching. It was when I stopped being a handler. I stopped being a handler when I took a leave of absence and I went out to San Diego for Cobra Canine and I worked at the Navy SEAL program. They were all on e-collar, and the one other trainer that was there with me was really good at e-collar, real smooth. And so I watched and I learned from him, and I'm like, man, I've been doing this way wrong. So I came back, and when I came back, I no longer was working a dog. I just was training, full-time training the dogs at the department, that and a bunch of other agencies. So then I really started deep diving into it, and I've changed my e-collar system 3, 4, 5 times over the years. I'm pretty much now where I'm going to be. Of course, training pet dogs kind of helped that, made me better at that. But it was still always just for the out, and just for, in the beginning, like just for the out and just for recall and just for the worst dogs. Like, it was the be-all, end-all. And that's never correct. Like, that's not right. There's still a lot of people that say, my dog doesn't, he has a perfect out, he doesn't need an e-collar. But when you tell him to come, the dog has 2 middle fingers. It's like, yeah, good luck. You know what I mean? So, and when we get into the tone stuff, you'll see there's so much more, or you guys know, but the audience will see there's so much more involved than just using stim. So that whole idea, I'm with you though. Day one, e-collaring, they don't have to wear it for 2 weeks and all that other crap. That's not true. You know, when we get a pet dog in, they start wearing the e-collar the first day, right? Because we might not be using stim. We're teaching them tone recall that first day, but still, right away. And if they're a dog that jumps on people, I put e-collar. I will extinguish that behavior on the first day through the use of the e-collar. He does not have to know what it is, right? He doesn't even. Your dog will quickly learn how to stop doing whatever it is he's doing to make that thing go away. They assimilate quickly. I also work the remote on when I'm doing a handler school for a little while. I'm working that remote. I have to force myself, like, listen, it's time. You know, you got to do it. But when I teach my seminars, a lot of times the dog is getting put on e-collar for the first time while I'm there. And the handlers, they have to do it. We only have 3 days. You know, you got to become an SME on this dog, right, with the e-collar. So I try not to keep the guys in kindergarten, so to speak. You know, I try to get them out faster within a few days. But, yeah, you got to start right away. It's the best tool. You know, the number 1 tool you're going to use with your dog is a leash. And the number 2 is a e-collar.
And I think that's my thought now is if you have an agency that's reluctant with an e-collar, but they issue their guys a leash and some version of a corrective collar, and they're walking around with that, they're doing recalls, they're doing healing, they're doing downs, and all those things, it should be, the e-collar should just be an extension of that communication that you have with your leash and your collar. So if you have good communication with your 6-foot leash, you have good communication with your 30-foot long line, why not extend that to 50 feet, 100 feet, or even the ability to have that same communication at 6 feet, but with the e-collar not having to be tethered to something. It just, I think we all have used Larry Crone's book at some point as just an introduction to the dog, and, you know, nothing really about Larry Crone's training specifically, but that book is a very simple introduction to handlers that, hey, this is just a way to communicate with your dog at the lowest level possible so that you don't hand an e-collar off to a guy, say, hey, run it up to 127, and this is just to jam up dogs. It's just a way to communicate with your dogs, and definitely with pet dogs, and we all three have dealt with the pet dog world and the police dog world, and there's a whole lot of crossover in both of those.
I remember early on when Gregg, when I started really watching you, probably at the beginning of the podcast, you were showing a lot of real beginner introductory stuff with a dog. I think at your house, maybe. Mm-hmm. I think it may have even been a Dutchie, if I remember, on e-collar, and it was real smooth. Never once did you see that dog flip out, you know what I mean? Because you were doing things the right way early on. There's a lot of things that we as trainers do, pet and police, where they baby the dog too long or they drag their feet too long when they can just step forward and move. And if they're doing it right, I always tell people in my things, when I get a dog, I have them off leash in a week. My first dog, it was 12 weeks to get that dog off leash. 12 weeks. Yeah. So get them out of kindergarten, guys. Come on, let's go. Move forward.
So let's talk about that process a little bit. Like what are you doing now that is different than 10 years ago, 5 years ago? What kind of epiphanies have you had along the way, and how have you changed your use?
So I changed it with how soon I was doing e-collar. I just get the dogs in and I start layering it over things that they know. I still teach everything with a leash and collar. I'm a big prong collar guy. Teach a leash and prong. Teaching, I start with recall on everything, just here, and throw in food. They go get it. A little bit of leash pressure. They turn, mark it, pay, and then I start layering that e-collar over it within a day or two, and I use negative reinforcement first, so I start with pressure first. They learn to turn the pressure off, which they've already learned through the leash. It's the same thing. Guys will do that with a leash and collar and not realize that with the e-collar, they're doing the same thing. But it took me a while to realize that you can't teach off-leash behavior off-leash. You have to pair it all together with a leash. So 10 years ago, I was like, yeah, this dog does not know what I'm talking about. Like, he doesn't know what I mean. I gotta get a leash back in there. Pure, true positive control of the dog. So when I'm pairing that, all the reps the first day of e-collar, all pressure first. And then the next day, they're all pressure afterwards, which I believe gets the dog doing the commands faster. And I do it all without talking, with the exception of the command. Yes, if I'm using a verbal marker, and maybe good, but no constant communication with this dog, talking to the dog too much. It's nice because I'll play music and I don't have to talk, right? I can just rep out dogs. So that second day, by the end of the day, I'm doing like here and then stim. Like there's a gap. Like, you should have been faster. Your fault. Faster. So the dogs are flying into command. And then the third day of that, they are now on consequence. It only takes 2 days if you have time to do the reps. Couple days with the leash, couple days with the e-collar, and now we can start advancing a little bit. They're on consequence. And by the weekend, so I'd get dogs in from Europe, start working them on a Monday. Saturday, I was like, well, we take the leash off today. I find when dogs are in my kennel, I love having them off leash because they poop faster. Selfishly, that's kind of one of the reasons. So that's how you don't need, and you're refining it and you're making sure. Some dogs, of course, need a little bit more reps than other dogs. You always got to work that one in front of you. But it's 300-400 reps a day, but only about 5 minutes at a time. That's the other mistake a lot of guys make. They're keeping these dogs out 20, 30 minutes. My first class, our obedience was an hour every morning. You want to talk about losing a dog? They hate it. You walk them out on the field, they're yawning and shaking because they hate it. You're just going to pound on me because we were just yank and crank. You're going to pound on me for an hour? So we're at 5-10 minutes. Boom, next dog, start over. Next dog. Rich and I both use the same concept on the pet dogs called, I call it the fives. You're probably pretty similar. And it's just 5 reps of all 5 things that we're teaching them real fast. Put them up, next dog, up. I do the same thing with police dogs. I started with pets. I'm like, they're dogs. It has to work with pet dogs. And the nice thing about it is, so now, by the end of the first week, the dog is on an e-collar. He is e-collar trained. He can get better. We haven't started correcting unwanted behavior yet. We're just, putting a little fuel to that collar.
To new handlers out there, we talked about this on the second day of the basic, and I think Eric just covered it. When you're communicating with your dog, that's teaching your dog to turn off pressure. So anytime you say you want your dog to sit, so you apply a little pressure straight up towards the sky, the dog feels that pressure on its neck, it drops down on its ass into a sit, you immediately let go of or loosen the leash so the dog understands that was the right thing. And in the beginning, if you're in your backyard or your home, you can add a treat into that, something like that, to make it even more enticing to go into that position. But as what you've taught your dog is when I add pressure to you, when I make life a little uncomfortable, you have the ability to turn that pressure off by doing a certain thing. In this case, we're talking about a sit. Dog sits down, pressure goes away, food, reward, something goes into its mouth, it feels good. Now, when you, like Eric said, you just overlay the e-collar onto that, it's another form of pressure. You ask the dog to sit, you add stimulation at a low level, not at 127, we're talking at like 8. Yeah, so the dog understands, oh, I'm feeling something else. It drops its ass down into a sit. That leash pressure goes away, the e-collar pressure goes away, and the dog gets a reward. Now the dog's bilingual in leash and e-collar. And that's we're just teaching the dog there's several ways to turn off pressure, and when you do it feels good.
So Eric, we're talking levels, we're talking new handlers. Where are you starting the dog out at, and are you looking for a reaction in the dog that he feels it, or are you kind of you have a standard set stem level on the e-collar that you start a lot of new dogs out at?
So I'm always, a lot of you guys have heard the working level. I'm looking for where I can tell that they feel it. Some dogs, depending on their genetic makeup or if they're a little bit fearful, I can kind of vapor lock a little bit, and you're going up. I go one number at a time, right? Up, 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 up until they can feel it. And some dogs, you're like, bullshit, you can feel this. And they're just ignoring it. And then you'll get to a number where you snap them out of it. They may even jump a little bit. Then I'm all the way back down to 8, 9, 10, depending on what collar we're using. If we're using like a Pro 550 on a Garmin, I'm probably starting on like a 2 low, and I'm trying about right there. And then I might go 2. I don't really use the medium that much. I'm more of a low and then a little smack on a high if need be, because there's such a difference. It's crazy. But just enough. I just want that little weird tingle if they're brand new, that weird tingle. Guys also understanding that outside is going to be higher than inside immediately. Guys get a little stuck on numbers sometimes. I'm more of a what is kind of working type deal. But as low as possible. If it's always the lowest number that they can feel and that works, I believe that they always accept that as that's acceptable. I'm okay with that. I also believe that dogs, when you do give a correction that they know came from you and they screwed up and they're like, yeah, okay, sorry, I fucked that up. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, and then you talked about the 5s. What's the 5s?
So 5s for us is sit down, come, place, and heel. Heel's a little bit kind of different in the very beginning, but when we get them out, we do 5 reps of all of those things. Oh, just boom, boom. So once I get them going, I'll do come, sit, or come, place, sit down. Now I've just done 4 of those commands, and then I do that 4 more times, and then I put the dog up. Next dog. Then we do it again, and before you know it, by lunchtime, if you start in the morning, by lunch, you've got 200 reps in the dog, and he's only been going 5 minutes at a time. He doesn't get stressed. He just work in the crate. Work in the crate. For me, with police dogs, it's get a dog out of the van, work them, put a next dog, start over. And just keep rolling through. By lunchtime, you have layered a lot of stuff on that dog. And now, because we have dual-purpose dogs, now we can go work on something else. I don't have to spend all day.
So, and all this is done online, on leash, right? And then are you doing any positive reinforcement in there? Are you using food at the end of that at all? Or is this just purely having them work through the pressure?
No, all it come back to me for food or whatever it is. I try to use food, which is a big change from what I learned in the beginning. If any of you listeners have ever been to my seminar or heard me at HITS, and Rich has been there, I always say, listen, guys, I promise you, if you use food with your dog, you will not suddenly like penis. It's such a weird thing in this industry. I'm like, if you came in this room and you don't like penis, that doesn't change by using food with your dog. And if you did like penis, that still doesn't change by using food with your dog. Because there's still a lot of older trainers that will tell you you should not be using food. That's sissy bullshit. They should just make them. Why? Why do I got to fight this dog? You know why? Some of these dogs I just met like 2 weeks ago.
Some of them you pick that fight, they want to fight, right? That's why we selected them. They like to fight. Now we're picking one, and now we got a problem.
What hill am I dying on today? No, none. I would rather not. You know what I mean? So I try to use food on every one of those. So the way my board and train I'll bounce back and forth between pet and police dogs, but I'll say police dogs. Say I start them on a Monday. By I don't know, like Tuesday the next week, we're off of food. They are now completely on consequence. They know. I mean, I still might say good. I still might scratch their head a little bit, or and maybe end a thing with a toy or something like that. But I get them working for food now, and if they won't, pressure is what works. That's the only thing that works with a dog who won't take food, guys, is pressure. It sounds counterintuitive, like a fearful dog, and you're using pressure. Yes, it's not ripping I'm not white knuckling this leash and ripping their skull off. It's teaching them that they're in charge of avoiding that or turning it off by doing what we say gives confidence to the dog. And I hate to say this to you out there, some of you in police land world, you have dogs that are a little fearful. There are some, not many, some police dogs that won't work for food, right? And about half pets won't, So, so I try to use as much positive reinforcement as I can. I don't go crazy, whoa, yeah, like that, because I'm not trying to set that dog into orbit. But, I'm a variable reward guy after like the first couple days too. Not this rep, maybe that next rep, I got that just straight from the police world.
I think that's the important thing for handlers and some trainers to understand, that when we're talking about using food for the existence of the dog's life, we're not walking out and going 10-8 with a pocket full of kibble, right? It's to help the dogs learn to learn. It's kindergarten. In kindergarten, nobody was asking you to do algebra and kicking your ass if you didn't do it, right? In kindergarten, everything was fun. There was a lot of gold stars and happy faces and long recesses and fun books. And then by the time you're in 7th or 8th grade, somebody said, hey, sit your ass down. It's time to sit in here and learn algebra and geometry and all that stuff. And it's not going to be fun, but it's what you have to do. So we want to make learning fun in the beginning. This has got to be exciting for the dog. It's got to be enjoyable. Like Eric said in the beginning, all three of us have been in the situation where we got a dog and somebody said, hey, go out there and make that fucker sit, heel, recall, and everything because you told them to from day one, all high compulsion. And the dogs would do it. But the difference between a dog that learns to do it because it's fun and enjoyable is a whole big difference than a dog that does everything because it has to do it. At some point, we're going to teach these dogs they have to do it, but it's based on a relationship that we've developed with positive reward. And food, again, doesn't make you anything different. You're just a handler that's rewarding your dog, And I'm sure child rearing has changed over the years, right? We all do that differently than our parents did. So things move on.
I'll tell you this. One of the things that I've recently changed with pet and police dog is in the beginning anymore, I will no longer force a dog in a down. I used to do that. I will not do that anymore. I find it for down, it's better to either self-discover or I'll make them sit in a sit so long that they physically can't do it anymore and they'll lay down and then I mark it and jackpot it. Why fight that? That's where guys get bit. That's where guys are getting bit on that standing on the leash. I did all that. I did that recently, not too long ago. Sweeping their legs out. I've done that a little bit still if I can lure with it a little bit, but any dog trainer will tell you, man, this dog sits, he does, he's a pain in the ass with the down. Oh, okay, then why? That, like I said, that's not a hill to die on. We'll work on it. We'll get there. I'm not worried about that. But that's a big change I've made recently, and I've empowered my trainers too, my pet trainers. Like, guys, we're not fighting dogs. We're not going to do that. Let's try our best, and then once they know it, and we know they know it, then we'll, there'll be some consequence for not doing it.
Well, and we're talking, too, at the early stages. So most of you handlers out there, like, you've just gotten your dog. And there's that, my favorite saying from Joel Monroe is that discipline without rapport equals rebellion. And what a better way to build rapport than with frickin' food. I think, Rich, did you want to touch upon that? This is a little off topic, but on Facebook, about, because we were talking about the existential training, where basically what we prescribe in the beginning is, hey, that dog's going to eat 3 cups a day. Put those 3 cups on your person, and all that food comes from you, and you can start luring and start doing obedience, and they learn the importance of you, and good things are coming from you. And then there's another subsection of, food deprivation.
Yeah, and I'll hit it super quick because there's plenty of information out there. But there's a conversation, and some trainers are prescribing food deprivation to their dogs. And when we're talking about hand feeding, or we're talking about, hey, let's keep the dog a little hungry so we can motivate them, I'm saying don't pour your dog's food into a bowl in the morning. Pour it into your pouch or whatever you're using to reward your dog, so it's hungry when you start training that morning. If somebody's telling you, hey, don't feed your dog for 3, 5, 7 days. And then when you start class at the end of that time, your dog's going to be essentially in a panic point where it's like, hey, I'm about to die if I don't get some food. And the goal is for the handler to look like the savior to that dog, to come in with a handful of food. And the dog is so much in distress because it hasn't eaten in 3, 5, 7 days that it's looking at you as a savior for any problem. If that's your tactic to get out, if that's your tactic to develop a relationship, if that's your tactic to make environmental better because your dog's so hungry, and you throw a piece of kibble across the linoleum floor so it decides now going across the floor is reasonable to get that food because it's starving, you're fucked up. There's a problem with that. There's a problem with starving a dog to get them to do something. And if you have to starve your dog to get something to happen, maybe your selection process is a little flawed, and you might want to go back to the fucking drawing board on that part. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, I'm not feeding you breakfast this morning, but you're going to get it at 9 o'clock when we start training. Or I know I'm going to do a lot of sits and downs and that kind of work at noon, so I'm going to withhold this morning's feeding, but I'm going to give you your calories today. They're just going to come from my hand. I'm not telling you, you don't get to eat for a week, and then we're going to come back in a week from now and I'm going to feed you again. If you have that trainer that's telling you to starve your dog, there's a problem there, and you should probably find a way out of that situation.
Yeah, I agree. Feeding or working your dog when he's hungry is different than food deprivation. Starving your dog. First of all, skinny weight loss, like heavy weight loss on dogs, is the kiss of death for like pet businesses, and it should be the kiss of death for police units if all your dogs look like that. And how good is it that, so you starve them for a week, 5 days, whatever. Class starts on Monday. You're gonna pump 4 cups of food in that dog's stomach right there in training, and not expect any adverse medical, barfing or shitting or anything like that. I mean, there's a lot of places that do it, and it's horrendous. I know of units where neighboring units will not use them, or if they're doing a demo, they're like, yeah, you're not bringing your dog out because he looks like a starving coyote. I mean, how bad? It's terrible. When I do my seminars, the first 2 days there's a lot of food, and I tell them, listen, just do me a favor, don't feed your dog breakfast. Pay attention to how much food you gave him throughout the day, and if you didn't meet your 4 cup or whatever it is, when you get home, give him the rest. We're not starving dogs. We just would like them to work for their food. That's all.
And you can create this early on in the relationship with the dog. Instead of pouring the food into a bowl every morning, pour it into the bowl, set it up on the counter, and then hand feed the dog. We can teach dogs to appreciate hand feeding. That's pretty easy stuff. We can make that happen. And at the end of the day, if the dog's not going to take food from you, we can definitely use pressure, like Eric said earlier. It's not the end all. Your emaciated dog is not the answer to these problems. So enough of food deprivation. Don't do it. Teach your dog to eat from your hands.
Now, Gregg, I'm not trying to hijack your podcast and be an interviewer, but you've been doing it for a long time. When did you start? How long have you been doing food training? Because I'm sure it wasn't in the beginning.
Well, what was funny was I did it I had an old German trainer back in the 90s, and I was watching some dogs and the sport dogs. I'm like, hey, how do they get their dog to like look at them? Like, because my dog was like doing the typical, beaten down obedience. We had choke chains, and he's like, it all comes with the timing of the correction. And I was like, okay. But outside of that, I actually went to an obedience class. Funny thing, at an animal rescue place, and had a puppy, and everything was with food with the puppy. Knew nothing about markers at the time, but one thing they taught me was put some hot dog in your mouth, and when the dog looks up at you, spit the hot dog out at him. And I went out there with my dog that had that foundation, and he was checking in with me and looking up at me. And the German trainer, I would have never told him I spit hot dogs at him, because he would have had my ass for that, because it's like, you're bribing that dog, you've ruined him, And it's like, but that taught me early on about the power of food. But like everything else, like everything later on was all toys, if we did toys, right? And it was like we abandoned food completely. And it wasn't until I started getting these crazy frickin' dogs from overseas that, if you start cranking on them right away, you're probably, like you're talking about, Eric, like hey, you're going to say down, and you're going to try to put that sucker in a down, you're probably going to get your ass eaten. So just out of necessity, it became of like, well, let's go back to the roots and then get some hot dogs and start luring them in there. But there was a long period of time that there's zero food. I mean, really. Yeah. And I'm trying to think to memory now of like how many years it's been, but out of 30 some years of training, it's only been the last 20% that actually started using food. And really now it's like in the handler, when we give a dog to a new handler, it's like mandated. Like, hey, this is how this dog is going to eat, is through food, and start luring him. So that's completely changed just over the last few years, really.
I got in K9 in 2005. I probably didn't start using food, I want to say 2015, probably. Like 10 years of, I had gone into using toys, create like a focus heel, and that was just a trick to get the dog through certification, because the guy could just throw a fist up here and the dog would get through it because he's nervous and everything else, the guy. Then I was like, what if I just teach a heel, right? Not a trick heel, a heel. And then we were rewarding all the reps with a toy. Well, now we're up here. Now the dog is a lot of times over threshold. A lot of these European dogs, they don't, listen, you don't have to build toy drive on those dogs. If you do, you selected the wrong dog. So then I was like, well, let's see. And I started using food, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we got 5 times the amount of reps in half the time. And I didn't have to take a toy from this dog. Because in the beginning, I didn't teach an out on anything. I was still a cocky jerk up until pretty late, where I'll get him. I'll fucking do that out in the last 2 weeks. I ain't worried about that shit. Just choke them in the meantime. Next thing you know, you're like, when you go to do the out, you're like, oh no. I should have done this weeks ago.
Yeah, and then you're forced to like up it, right? Because like, hey, well, we got to get it today.
Yeah.
And then that's where it's pretty unfair to the animal, and we were all guilty of it back then, right? Mm-hmm.
So I think now we understand, like, the dogs work off of pressure. We understand ways to reward the dogs. Obviously, food gets you a lot more reps. I think the thing now, and the cool thing about this is all 3 of us, I know for a fact, we're doubters on this, right? And next thing we're talking about is tone. And we're talking about tone across the board, using tone for recalls, tone for aversion away from things that the dog shouldn't be fucking with, and tone for outing off of a bite for a dog that might be sticky, or even a dog that's not sticky. And the circle that we've come to is, we just started a whole basic class last week, and we used tone on every dog for an out, and had phenomenal success, and several of those dogs we knew were coming in sticky. Some of them had been recycled, some of them were coming from overseas, and tone made everything clean. And again, I know Gregg was doubtful in the beginning. I was certainly doubtful. Aaron and I probably argued, and I think at some point, Eric, you and I definitely referred to the tone as a gimmick. Mm-hmm. And all 3 of us are using it, and not sparingly, we're using it all the time.
Well, it's like human nature, right? Like that's the first time I heard of a breaker bar. I was like, "Are you kidding me? What do they do? That's the dumbest thing I ever." And then I looked into it, and guess what? We're issuing every new handler that starts training, right? And so I think tone is the same way. Like you're initially like, "That's crap," you know that, and then you're gonna find ways to pick it apart. And then, but you know what's interesting about all three of us is, at the end of the day, we really care about what we do. And we can set our egos aside and go, you know, hey, I'm an old dog, but fucking, like, that's working. And I don't care what we're doing. And I think this goes back to food, too, Eric. Like, you were talking about just, you know, later in your training career, you know, saying, hey, I'm going to start using food. I mean, that says something to you and your character, and that your objective is to train the dog the right way and to the best way possible. And you're willing to set aside all that preconceived notion stuff and push forward, where there's so many dinosaurs in this industry that are repeating the same year for 30 fucking years, and they're training the same way. This tone thing was one of those things. I think we all had that adverse reaction of like, what? That's dumb. But then let me investigate it, and then let me see the proof, and the proof is out there, guys. So listen up on this. So, Eric, can you tell me why you think the tone works, kind of the theory behind it, and then go into how you're implementing it into your training?
Yeah, so let's go all the way back to Pavlov ringing the bell and the food, bell, drool, right? So the anticipation of the food is what causes the drooling. And so the bell is like a marker which triggers all that. What we do with the tone is the same thing, where the tone is an anticipation of a correction. So the tone actually ends up having more value than the stim itself. It's just the way dogs learn. I tell people, I don't know who the comedian was that used to have this great bit about the best position in life for a human is being next. So like you're waiting for the roller coaster, and that's when everybody gets excited, when they're next. And I can let someone in front of me. That's cool. I'm still next. Anticipation. And it's the same way with dogs, where when you do detection work and the dog gets that odor and he head snaps into it, and he's sitting there and he's all locked up, and drool comes out of the dog's mouth while he's sitting there waiting on the toy. That's where the dopamine comes in. Anticipation. When the toy comes in, it's been proven, dopamine drops, right? They get their toy, they relax. But that's why the marker is so effective, where you can mark that and wait because the marker then has the value, because it's coming. I'm next, right? So it's the same kind of thing with the tone, and the tone takes the human being completely out of it. My e-collar without conflict for working dogs could be titled, shut up, stop talking, stop interjecting yourself into every command or into every correction, everything in this dog's life. Guys still talking full sentences to their dogs. So what I really started noticing was, I used to do the move where in the beginning it was with a leash, and then it was with an e-collar, where it would be sit and stim at the same time, down, stim at the same time, everything at the same time, creating my words as a correction. And what I started noticing was I walk behind a guy, heel, and the dog leans away from him. Sit, and he sits away. Every time he talks, he's anticipation a correction, because you have paired it that way. And there's a lot of trainers that train that way, and there's a lot of dogs that can do it. But what I find in my seminar, I'm fixing dogs that were taught that way. So then you now have a problem. You and your dog have a problem. One of my favorite things to say is your dog needs a leader to live for and fight for, not a punisher to fear or fight against. In the pet dog world, them viewing you as a punisher, they get nervous, they get anxious, just in your behavior. They get anxious. Some of them will kind of blow you off a little bit. In the police dog world, you get bit by your dog. You get, most of dudes that are bit by their dog is anticipation of a correction. A dog preemptively strikes that guy because, you fucker, you're not hitting me again on this. Is, you get dogs in, if you've used to buy, did you ever used to buy KNPV title dogs? Mm-hmm. You get those dogs in, you might be one correction one correction from wearing that dog, and you don't even know it because they've been training them with a steel-toe boot all that time, you know? And so why have that relationship? I don't want that dog when I walk into the room or into the kennel to get him or get him out of the car to be like, is it now? Now? Is it coming now? When's it coming? So we use tone as a verbal warning or a signal warning that your behavior is about to get you corrected. Not my fault. I'm the leader. I didn't do that to you. You did that to yourself. Dogs are huge narcissists. They don't want to correct themselves. In the words of Justin Rigney, he says the best correction the dog can get is one that he thinks he caused himself or the environment did. So I try to get in the guy's heads. I'm like, listen, we're correcting the behavior, not the dog. If you correct the behavior will stop. If you correct the dog, so to speak, he's going to fight you. Or he's going to get weird. Like, he might just, like, not like you at all. And so you think about this. The dog in the dog's mental state is, I need this guy. Like, I need this guy. Even your police dogs only need water, food, shelter, and pack fulfillment. Pack fulfillment is having a leader to give him all those other things. The leader to tell him yes, no, black, white, always, never, which way to go. You can't go left because I'm going right. Make everything clear. That's what the dog needs. They got to have a leader. So they're looking at you, and they're like, I need this guy because I need him to eat. I need him for all these things. I need him to drive me to do all this fun shit. But son of a bitch, every time he opens his mouth, I'm getting corrected. So now we're in conflict. Now we got problems. So the way we do with the tone, I call it tone avoidance. Rich calls it tone aversion. It's using the tone. It's a classically conditioned marker that your behavior or the kitty litter or whatever it is about to get you corrected. Your fault, not my fault. And the interesting thing that I always come up with, like Aaron, goofy shit to say. Like I stole a quote I put in my whole entire package from Rich about, in a pack of 20 wolves, 19 of them have chosen to be followers. Chosen for their whole life. They're going to follow. They got to have a leader. Dogs are kind of the same way in that regard. But with dogs, unlike humans, you can correct intent. You can correct or warn what's going on in their head. Humans, I don't think it's as easy because they'll lie to you. Like with kids, you'll be like, you were about to pick that thing up. No, I wasn't. No, dogs can't lie. So when you see the dog turn, ooh, cat shit, you can correct or warn before they even get there, because their intent, they're laser focused on what they're going to do, and you can use the tone function because the tone is backed up by stim. They know that if they beep and they walk away from it, then see, I didn't get myself corrected. You guys see that? How cool that was? But, and then what happens is when you use it operationally, they won't eat the cat shit. You can do a building search and they're not going to grab the couch cushion at this person's house and destroy their couch, because that couch in the past has been made of fire and has corrected them. Their fault, not my fault. And the nice thing about it is when you're working a dog, you don't have to be yelling and giving away your position. If you're searching a school building or a place that got broken into, you can use tone to manipulate them in and out of rooms, and we can get into that a little bit later if you want. But the tone function. Now, listen, guys, if you're listening to this and you're like, "Why, fuck, I use Dogtra," vibrate is the same. The vibrate in a lot of cases actually is even better, works even better. It's such a startling thing to the dog that it works really, really well.
Eric, I'm going to piggyback on that. And another analogy that we've come up with is a relatively intelligent dog that's high in drive will chase, 1,000 cats, 1,000 squirrels, and typically stop at one porcupine. Same movement, the thing's running, the dog goes into drive, it goes to chase that porcupine, and the porcupine gives a warning. We can call that the tone. It stops and it freaking extends all those quills. And the dog says, "That's a funny looking cat. Fuck it. I'm going in for it." It got the tone, right? It got the warning. Now it goes in for the grab. Next thing you know, its face is full of quills, and the dog's like, hey, those kind of cats suck forever. And like I said, a relatively intelligent dog. There's some dogs that will chase porcupines for their entire life. That's a selection process. That's not the dog I'm bringing on board, right? But now I have a dog that understands I can chase a lot of things, but those cats will fuck you up. That's essentially life's version of tone followed by stim. It gave you a warning. You didn't heed the warning, and then you got stemmed. Now, every time it chases that cat, that's a porcupine, and that cat stops and it shows its quills, that dog says, that one's different than all the rest. I'm going to take that warning and I'm going to go elsewhere. Doesn't change his drive. He's still going to chase the cats and the squirrels. He's just not chasing the one that has quills on it. So like you said, if you're in the middle of a search and the dog always likes to fuck with the cushions, you tone it, that dog says, that's one of those couches that'll light on fire. I'm going to go around that and continue my search. Never leaves drive, stays in the search, but understands now the couch is off limits because the universe said so, not because my handler back there is yelling at me and I'm having conflict with the handler. I now have conflict with the couch. I can yell at my dog all day long not to chase the porcupine. Doesn't matter until the porcupine throws a quill in its face, and then it's like, hey, those things suck and they're going to suck forever and I'm going to avoid it. So nature has a way of doing that, and we're just replicating what nature does. We're going to give you a warning from the universe, and if you don't follow that warning, then there's going to be stimulation from the universe. I don't say shit. And then the dog understands that those things are always off limits. That problem is always a problem. I'm going to avoid it, and I'm not mad at my handler about it because that guy never even said anything to me.
So let me be the crusty old trainer. That's stupid shit right there. You just tell that motherfucker don't do it, and then you stim him on a 127, that fucker won't do it. What's the problem with that?
Well, the one side, on my end, and I'll let Eric answer too, we've all been teenagers, and my parents always said, don't do that shit. And I said, absolutely. I won't do that shit while you're watching. I'll do my very best not to get caught. But there's nothing in the universe that has said, I shouldn't go visit Sally down the street. I'm still motivated to do that. I'm still very excited to do that. I'm still going to violate every possible rule to do that. I'm just not going to get caught. And me not going to Sally's house is a conflict with me and my parents, not with me and Sally. Now I go to Sally's house and I engage in something, and maybe she punches me in the face every time I walk over there and I don't get to have the fun that I thought I was going to have. Now the universe has told me to stay away from Sally's house. That's a whole different conversation than me responding to my parents about that, right? Dogs aren't much different than that. Eric, what's your response on that?
Yeah, and so sometimes the higher correction can work and extinguish some things here and there. But oftentimes, if the dog doesn't know why it's happening and doesn't know how to shut it off, and those things that's where a leash comes in, you're just wasting time, like sending the dog on a recall, or a call off, whatever people call it, where they don't engage. And in Ohio, it's called, I forget, but we call it recall. And
yeah, we call it call off. Same thing.
So if you just send them down there and hit them on the e-collar, they don't. What does that mean? Why is this happening? Is it because of this guy? Is it because of whatever? So things aren't, made absolutely clear. There are nevers for me that I'll skip the tone and just use stim, like counter surfing if a dog eats stuff. You can, in the operation, like you're working and the dog goes over and he grabs a stuffed animal or whatever. You can, without saying anything, use stim until that thing is made of like ghost peppers and he spits it out, But now, what does that make him weird? Sometimes dogs on too high a stim can get strange. They can get real fearful in it. The tone, they just turn and walk away. They're just on to the next thing. Beep. There's nothing. That's why it works so much better than just using the straight to the 127.
I think we'll overlay that video, Eric. We've passed it back and forth, but we had a guy from the Bay Area that brought his dog to the class in Reading, and that dog, according to the handler, went up the leash all the time. Anytime there was conflict, if he said, hey, leave that alone, hey, don't go over there, whatever it was, the dog's like, you and I don't have that relationship. Every time you tell me not to do something, I'm going to bite you. So we put that dog in a room, and in that room there was a burrito, I think a sandwich, dog treats, a bite sleeve. There's a bunch of stuff. The dog walked around the room, and every time it approached something that was off limits, tone. And the one thing that got him, I think he actually picked up either the burrito or the bite sleeve, one of them.
The sleeve, yeah.
Yeah, it was a sleeve. So he walks over there, toned him. He's like, this thing's way too valuable. Put his mouth on it, followed it immediately with stim. He dropped that. Dog walked around the room, found the cot, went and laid on the cot and hung out. No conflict with the handler. Nobody said a word. And the dog said, hey, that thing's a problem, that thing's a problem, that thing's a problem. Cot seems pretty reasonable. I'm just going to lay here.
Yeah, and the guy says he would have never let go of that. It would have been a fight. And these guys weren't even on the road that long. And he's been bit by the dog, and they have a lot of problems. He couldn't do off-leash anything, and we use stim and stuff to teach that. But, yeah, we changed their whole entire relationship, and just through the tone. So now there is no correlation between the correction that happened and the guy whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that's Greg. I know we're using tone on outs a lot right now. And I think, there's plenty of people out there that say, just make them do it, right? Apply pressure. There's a lot of ways to get an out. But the nice part is if you can get it with tone, there's no correlation between the handler. And one of the biggest fights we have across the board when there is conflict is a dog trying to get a dog out off of something, right? Like, hey, I need you to let go. You're not letting go. Now the fight has to be on, right? You have to get an out. There's no way around that. So there has to be some way you can lure them with a toy, but if the toy is not valuable enough, then they're not going to let go. You can lift off, you can e-collar, you can do all those things, but all those things require direct conflict. Hey, dog, let go. I don't want to. I said let go, and now we have to fight. Now it's that tone jumps in there, and for whatever reason, the dog takes it as communication from the universe and not from the handler, and the conflict goes away.
Nice, yeah. Yeah, we've been seeing the same thing. This is one of those things where for you handlers, like we always say, hey, pick and choose your battles, and you don't have to have this battle if it's coming from the universe. I always say it's coming from God, right? And so the dog can't fight God. And so it's not associated with you. So we talked about relationship issues. Hey, all the good shit's coming from you, and now God's telling him not to do that, and it's just one less battle that you have to personally fight with this dog. And again, these dogs have been selected to fight, and they want to fight. And, the wrong dog, we're going to have a lot of problems with if you just start high stimming. Like you said, Eric, I've seen dogs get shut down in searches. They start biting a couch. So what does the handler do? He starts high stimming them, and then the dog goes, hey, they associated it with the search. And they go, I'll just hang out with you then. Mm-hmm. Am I getting corrected for the search? Just like you handlers that want to nickel and dime your dogs for peeing on a search with the e-collar, same thing. Like all of a sudden, we go out with a handler and the dog's not leaving the handler. I'm like, what's going on? I was stimming him for peeing. Well, great. Well, you solved that because now he won't even go out.
Yeah,
he won't
right.
leave your side. And I think that for you guys looking at it like, well, how's this apply to me? Like the tone is such a lesser than getting the stim, but they still get the point. But like you guys were talking about, they stay focused in what they're doing. They take the point that they don't need to do that particular behavior, but you're not knocking the wind out of them and sucking the drive out of them in the process.
And I'll give you two things on that. One, I was in Philadelphia, big, huge group, and there's always somebody at every one of because I'll talk an operational thing here in a second, but there's always somebody that says, I don't want it to affect his search. I don't want it to mess with the way he's searching. And I'm like, I'm telling you, I've done this a lot. It doesn't do it. So what happened was the guy had to do, this was the last day. So he's done 4 or 5 sets of tone avoidance and teaching them with that. He had to do a raid with the task force at first thing in the morning. So he comes to training after the raid and he goes, dude, so they wanted me to sniff this inside this house, search the house for drugs. And the dog's off leash and he kept wanting to go over and greet and play with the task force guys. So he says, I just toned him off of all the guys that he wanted to mess with. And guess what? I go, what? He goes, he went to work. He just started doing what he's supposed to be doing instead of dicking off. And it didn't make him afraid of the guys and it didn't make him weird. Because if he just went over and stemmed him on every guy, the dog's probably going to just come and sit with the dude. Just go over there and, yeah, this seems to be a safer spot. But tone, they just, beep, it's just classical conditioning. They just walk away. And my other thing was in a training environment. So I put drugs in we're human, so we're habitual. We use things with drawers all the time. Things that we can, and humans probably mostly do it too, drug dealers and everything. Because it's easy. Open the drawer, put the dope in, close it. All right, now that's a hide. I got one in. So what I'll do is I'll pick a room that maybe we've used in the past, and I'll put the dope way in a back corner, and maybe in a light socket or something, way in the back. And there'll be a dresser or a desk, something that's a productive environment. The dog will go, there's no odor, sniffs it, walks off. But he's not going to go deep enough. He doesn't go deep enough to get to the corner. And then he'll come back. Let me try this desk again. He'll try it. There's still nothing there. And the third or fourth time, many dogs will come over and solicit a response from you. They'll just false alert. They'll just go sit down. And so what I started doing when we know there's no dope there, maybe I'll let them try a second time. And they come back, just beep. They walk off and will not come back to that desk in that series. And then so then I started manipulate. You can manipulate them around the room like we do in that video that Rich was talking about. We funneled through the tone warning that dog to the cot. So I started doing it with a dog in my kennel, a huge room with a dog bed in the middle of it. And I just taught him tone avoidance, and I toned him off of bite suits and equipment and this and that and funnel. He laid down next to my feet. I had Tony jumped up on the bed. So I'm like, this has to work in building searches. So we started doing building searches, and I've added that into my class. Started doing building searches, and all the doors are closed but one. So he runs down the hall, right, because the guy didn't really work, a searching sequence. So they just run to the hall. Not saying I've never done that, but he goes down and goes in the room. There's nothing in there. Searches, comes back out. He looks around. That thing's still open. Goes, let me try it again. So I just started beep on like the second time. The dog just then goes to work. Then he goes and looks at the other places that he hasn't checked yet. So it's real, and you don't have to give yourself away. We also teach a long tone recall. I think you guys were doing that. We teach a long tone recall, which is where I first thought Aaron was all full of shit and a gimmick, because I knew Aaron, but I didn't have a Ridgeside, and we weren't that good of friends. And I would watch his videos. He'd be at 3:00 in the morning on his property, beep, and the dog would come running, and he would talk about tone recall, and I go, that's just bullshit. That's just a trick so that the owners feel good about not using stim. But it isn't true. It actually is pretty valuable, and we use it. Then the dog's in the building, and I got me and the homies, and we're searching. And I'm like, where the fuck's he at? Beep, and then he'll come run and find the human being, and I didn't have to yell and let the suspect know exactly where I'm at.
The other upside to that, I want to jump on that because this is we've been playing with it since you showed us that tone recall. So when I'm using a verbal recall, I don't want to water that down. So if I say Fido here, Fido better make his ass all the way back to me. And if I say Fido here, and every time I call Fido to me, I let him come halfway, and then he gets to start researching, you're going to eliminate the value of your recall, right? If I don't get a full recall every time, then I'm not going to get a full recall when I need it. So I use that tone. I need Fido to come halfway down the hall, and then I need him to go into a room. So I tone, Fido comes halfway down the hall. I let off tone. There's no requirement now that Fido makes his way all the way back to me. He can come halfway. I let off the tone, and now I can search, and then he can go and do his thing. So it's a nice way to have your dog come part of the way back, which almost everybody does when they tell their dog to recall. They really only want them to come a certain way, a certain path, and then they're letting them search anyway. So now you don't have to water down your recall, and you can get a partial recall intentionally, and it doesn't ruin anything because the dog only has to return to you while the tone is on. It's pretty nice. Like, it clears that up.
Yeah, and I teach 3 recalls. I'll teach verbal, which is backed up by stim. I teach a long tone, and I will teach a stim only emergency recall. Dog's running for the road. If I had to get recall on a dog, a police dog, because he's chasing and the dog's going over the 5, and I got to get him off that highway. He's just going to get killed. I'm getting on. He can't hear me, or I can't remember his name. I'm just getting on that pressure, right? Because it all starts with turning off pressure. And so there is value to that, but you have to work that type of thing. We do it with the pet dogs too. I have to see that, all 3 of those.
Hey, Eric, and we're coming up on the hour, and I want to get to this. Can you give us the blueprint for the process that you use to introduce the tone, and then kind of kind of the schematic of it, and listeners, please understand, like most trainers, we're like, hey, this is the process I like to do it, but we always have to train the dog before us. So a lot of times you have to make adjustments as you go. But can you just give us kind of the general theory and the blueprint from when you get a new dog to, introduce the tone and where you want them to be at the end?
All right. I can even go all the way up to the out if you want to just kind of get it all in one. So awesome. I get the dog. The first thing I do with them is tone recall. We're working the recall stuff, the leash pressure, and then we'll do, usually towards the end of the first day, I'll start doing tone. And it's just a long tone and a little correction with the leash, a little guidance to get the dog's head turning towards me. I'll mark that, but even if I have to use the leash and run backwards, whatever, tone all the way to the human being, all the way back to me, and it comes off. It actually, once the dogs are, because at first some of them are like, what the hell is that? That weird noise. It starts to be kind of fun to them, You'll see when you do a lot of tone recall, you can actually stop that dog's forward momentum. He's getting out a little bit further than you're comfortable with. You start the tone, he'll stop, then turn and come back. And a little trick that I learned from actually Rich when I was out there in California, using the dog's pack mentality against him, and I always say dogs have a little bit of FOMO, is we get him out and we're doing that long tone, especially when we're getting to the part where we're going to be doing off-leash stuff. I'll start hitting tone and just turn and walk the other way, especially if I got a couple people with me. We just start walking the other way. The dog's like, shit, where are you going? And they come running right past you, right? Because they just want to be with the group. So those are little things that you can do to get the dog coming with vigor, Tone all the way to the person, all the way to the person, all the way to the person. Next day is, and my seminar's a little bit sped up. It's a little bit different. But the next day I start what I call tone avoidance. So we let the dog, like I'm in one of the rooms at my pet facility. I'll bring him in there and we just let this dog loose in here. Wild ass dog, second day of training. And I just decide what he's allowed to touch and what he isn't, which he's not allowed to touch anything but a dog cot in the middle of the room. He might never even go to it, but I hit tone, stim, whatever. I find that working level first, that lowest level. Knowing that I may have to go up depending on what the item is. Tone, stim. He'll walk away from whatever it is. Tone, stim, tone, stim, tone, stim. Basically, I'm putting an underground fence on everything in this room. Police dogs, I do the same thing at my facility. I don't make it super hard in the beginning. But same concept, tone, stim, about 5 minutes. In about 5, maybe 10 minutes, the dog will stand in the middle of the room. Like I'm not touching anything, because I keep getting myself corrected. Now I know that the dog is starting to understand. He's getting conditioned that tone is a warning that his behavior or the garbage can or whatever it is about to get him corrected. He will just leave it alone. Every session I do from there forward, it gets harder and harder. I'll put out peanut butter, always gets him. We'll throw the jar of peanut butter out there. That usually you get stimmed for that. They'll beep. Nah, let me try it, and they'll sniff. I'm the same way. You give me a spoon of peanut butter, you're gonna have to put it on 127. But so this is the big thing, guys. It's not tone. It's tone, then stim if he doesn't stop, higher stim if it's a higher value. It doesn't take but a couple sessions. Then I start getting worse, harder. With working dogs, I'll put a wedge out, and I usually put the wedge on a table or a platform or something because the dogs don't really see it right away. And then that's going to be on the floor. Then we're going to have a bite bar sleeve. And then we're going to have a suit top. And we're going to get harder and harder. And it doesn't make them afraid to bite sleeves and suits. But what it does is your dog, no police dog, under any circumstances, in any case, should pick something off the floor. Never. So then they stop doing dumb shit when they're doing searches. And they leave it alone. Because I'm telling you, I can tone and then stem a dog off of a loose suit top, and he'll back up and he'll avoid it, and you can put that suit top on and he's going to bite it, period. So it doesn't have any negative effect. It doesn't make them hate bite sleeves. It's just that they're not supposed to be deciding on their own to pick shit up off the floor. That's how they get killed. That's how they get sick. That's how they screw up people's houses. I had my second dog, Willie, destroyed an entire nativity scene at a church in the middle of the night on a search one time. I couldn't stop him, right? I didn't have e-collar. Dude, he ripped baby Jesus' head off. It was horrible. So we're doing tone avoidance, tone avoidance, tone avoidance. I'm starting to manipulate him a little bit harder and harder. If some things with working dogs, maybe a wedge or a sleeve, are so high value that you'll find yourself high in stim, I always just stop, take it from him, and then I will teach that in the context of what that equipment is for. But what I started doing is I'll take, say, we had a dog that this one wedge, he was never, it's just not going to let go of it. He avoided the sleeve and the suit, this damn wedge. So what I started doing was I manipulated the environment and I put it high on a shelf. So he could see it, but he couldn't get to it. And then I could teach tone avoidance that way, not really letting him get that opportunity, And guys always get worried and bummed out when their dog didn't let go of the suit top and they're flinging and dragging it all in the room and everything. I'm like, I'm not worried. We'll get it. We'll get it in the content. You're never going to find, in any search of anyone's houses, you're going to find a bite suit top or unless some decoy really went off the rails. I say that, but in Connecticut, they did a demo one time, and there was a criminal watching the demo. He went and bought a bite sleeve, and when they finally came to his house for him, the dog he caught the dog on the sleeve. When they came in, he was on the sleeve. Fucking brilliant, but 1 in a million. So I teach in that. So tone avoidance. If you don't want to do tone recall, that's cool. But if you have a dog tray, you can't. But you start teaching either tone or vibrate avoidance right away. Beat around the room. Low stim is needed, higher if they're going up. So then I've done this in real time, with a dog in my kennel who was horrendous. He was an amazing dog, but just was not going to let go. And it was a fight. I'm just trying to imprint a dog on odor, and every rep is a massive fight. And we're doing 2 reps, and he's gassed because I have to keep choking him out for the toy. So we did tone avoidance. He was the one I told you I manipulated around the room to the thing. So then they got tone avoidance. Now we're going to out the toy. I always start with the toy before the bite work. There are occasionally a dog that I have to do bite work first and then toy second, because the toy is just... We had a dog in North Carolina that you could not have the ball in eyesight. He was not going to bite anything else. We were doing bite work, and he's let go and just stared at this ball. It was just too much. But that's not typical. So what I do is I'll back tie the dog, or I'll have somebody post up. I prefer back tie. We give them or up on the table. Give them the ball and a rope or whatever their favorite toy is. I try not to start with a tug, but I get there. Ball and a rope. We're letting him play with it. We'll just use the word out. We'll go out, tone, stim. He spits it out. We roll it, throw it right back to him. If he spits it on the floor, we kick it, kind of get it liven up a little bit. Out, tone, stim, out, tone, stim, out, tone, stim. And what happens is about 6-7 reps, he'll race the stim and out on the tone. And now I know we're headed there. I don't want the tone to be the out. I want out to be the out. Tone is a warning. Stim is you fucked up, right? But I don't say anything. What happens is the onus for out and not getting corrected is put on that dog. It's not a fight with me. It's an inner conflict. He's in charge of avoiding that stim. All he has to do is out, and he gets it back, right? So out, tone, stim. He starts racing, and once they race the stim and out on tone, about 2 more reps, and they're going to start outing on out. And every once in a while, let me see if he's going to make me tone shit. He made me. You just got to play with it a little bit. And there's one thing I started doing a little bit differently than even when I was out at Rich's. Some dogs have been conditioned before I even get there to hold on. Just fucking hold on. Roll. And they're going, and what do? You stop because it's not working. And they're like, got it. All I got to do is fucking hold on, right? So I'll do a little bit more of a slap. If I see a dog who's outing, he's doing okay, but then he's slow rolling me a little bit on the tone. Maybe I'm getting the tone a little bit too much. I will smack him with a little bit higher stim, and he'll pop off. Very next rep, 100% of the time, is a verbal out. And you can call it. It makes me look like I'm a ninja, like some wizard. That I go, next one's verbal. Like, only because I've seen it 100 times. So we do it, and then I get a wedge. I like to end on a wedge, even though it's a little bit of bitey, but still a toy because it's working with the person. Same thing, outing. Now, I can go to work and rep this dog, and he's verbally outing the ball, and it's not a fight. And we did 5 times the amount of reps, right? So then either the same day, I've done all this in one day before too. I don't prefer it, but that night, later that day or the next day, we start doing the bite work. And we know there's a myriad of reasons that cause a dog to be sticky. The Jerry Bradshaw sticky out comment. That's where I got that from, was Jerry. There's a myriad of reasons. Not long enough time on the bite, too much yank and crank off it, too much fight, mostly a relationship problem with the decoy or the handler. When in my conference, when I say, how many of you guys, when you walk up to your dog on the bite, does he spin away? And a large portion of the people raise their hand. You guys have a problem. You have a conflict. So that's all kind of part of my whole system. But now that he knows out is out, we start doing it on the bite work. Oftentimes I do a sleeve first and then a bite suit top. I'd like to try to end it on the ground in a bicep. That seems to be the ultimate, way to go. But because we condition it 2 days prior doing it, they start the out procedure on the bite work is much faster. I used to hold and roll till they popped. I stopped doing that. I'm more of a up tap type deal. But I'm always coming back down. I always try to come back down. So the same thing, out, tone, stem, out, tone, stem. Now that's out, tone, and they beat and it's the same cadence. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you're building that routine into the dog. So now they're racing the stem and they're outing on tone. Then they race the tone. And I've had dogs that are on their last chance. They failed 2 certifications. Next week is their last chance. So the dog's out, and maybe even the handler. And we're getting verbal outs. I've had guys damn near cry over it. And so it like changes lives. Dogs that have never outed. And there's no fight. There's no more fight. They're not turning and biting the guy who they fucking know is doing that to them, right? Now it's, if they got corrected, that was their fault. And you'll see them. They'll tone, they'll out. Then they hold off on the tone. They don't. And you hit a stem. Okay, they slow it. And then that little smack is like, shit. I was fucking around. I'm not going to fuck around anymore. The next rep is verbal, then verbal, then verbal, and then we put them up. Life-changing for a lot of guys. I've only ever had a couple dogs that didn't work on, and some dogs I've had to go back and use a dominant dog collar pressure in conjunction with tone and stem, and then a couple reps that starts to get away. It's still taking air for some dogs, but and then there was a dog that I did that he's just never ever going to let go of anything in his mouth, ever. It's just not going to happen. I probably wouldn't have selected him, So, but we had a dog from Canada that I did that ate, he was a single-purpose patrol track dog. He ate a Monster Energy can while we were doing tone avoidance. He ripped a couch completely off, destroyed a rosin bag and a pitching mound, ripped home plate out. This was just us trying to work recall and tone avoidance with him. And I have a video. I have it in my class of him verbally outing a bunch of times. And eventually he went back. He passed certification. They eventually got rid of him. He bit a guy's ear completely off and ate it. So that had nothing to do with me or the out. That just is a dog. That's just that dog, So, and what I'm finding is the other thing too, as I started talking about in my conferences, is the power of twos. And the power of twos to me is, if you reward the second thing they get to the second thing faster, because the second thing is what causes the reward. So when I'm having dogs that are outing, but they're hovering, in any little movement, they're rebiting, because that was the out reward. They're doing it, but they're just kind of right there. I'll put a sit or a down in that dog, and then the sit or the down is what pays them. And a lot of us do that, but you don't think about it's just a routine in how you train. You don't think of how you're actually closing the loop on a dog. That what happens is then those dogs that are real sticky, they'll start outing and slamming into the down, because the down is what paid, right? So like with reactive pet dogs, I started doing this thing where they're going to react. I correct them, then I get them to look at me, and then I pay the look over. So I'll mark when they move away and say good, mark and pay the look, mark, correct, mark, mark and pay the look, and then eventually I stop and I only pay the look. So the dogs will see a thing that makes them nervous, and they'll just turn and look at me, because the second thing is what pays. So also power of twos you can fuck up your dog with it, like this sit, stay, turn around, walk. The second thing pays them when you call them to you. They'll break the down to get to you to get paid. So it's just a way to put it in a concept. So when I see a dog that's outing and hovering, add a second thing, sit down, back to you, something, and then pay that. It'll clear up a lot of stuff. But the nice thing is, and it's hard for guys to do, they want to talk to the dog and they want to give multiple commands and over and over and over and over. And I'm like, listen, dude, if we're on video, your body cam, and you just told that dog to out 11 times, your career you might be in jeopardy, or your program. So.
Eric, do you have seminars coming up?
Yeah, I'm supposed to be in Knoxville. It's a civilian one. I'm not. I don't know how that's going. The civilian ones usually are a little slow filling up. I'll be in Dothan, Alabama, Indiana, Springfield, Illinois, South San Francisco with Marty and the boys up there.
Yep. In June.
Going up there. I'm trying to get to NYPD. That might happen, and possibly one in Florida. And I'm going to Penn Vet in Philadelphia, and I can't remember where else.
Yeah, I just talked to Riverside too. I don't know if they reached out to you, but they confirmed that after July.
After July. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
They wanted it either early, like January, or later.
Yep.
And I end up taking January off, but now it's going to be all the time.
Yep.
And here's the thing, if you're listening to this, my seminar isn't just about, I teach you the tone stuff. I teach you how to relay your e-collar, but I teach you all the stuff you're doing on and off duty that's creating problems with your dog. And so I'll leave you with shut your center divider and stop fucking touching your dog.
You've been saying that for years.
Deaf ears, buddy, deaf ears.
Nobody listening. Yeah, no, this has been awesome. We appreciate you taking your time. You're a super busy guy. You're one of those guys that's just 24/7, 7 days a week.
I can't sit still, man. I can't do it.
Yeah. Well, you're in good company.
Yeah, right.
Bad company, because we can't seem to do it either. We're freaking retired, quote unquote, and working more than ever. But it's a passion, so that's the difference right now. And I think you're the same way. And so, again, dude, like, thank you for sharing this information, right? Like, nobody's paying you to be here this morning, and you're giving out this information for free. Just like your podcast, like you guys have been doing a lot, doing it for years. So thank you for your contribution. And it's like guys like you, that's why this industry is progressing.
Yeah, I love it. I love that a bunch of guys like you and some other guys started podcasts. I'm an avid listener to everybody. As you know, I bitch you guys out for not putting out enough content. I think your stuff is really tight, is really good. The way you started doing with the videos that you put in there to go over is honestly is something we should have done, and we're not going to do it because that's your thing. That's what you do. We'll do what we do, and I'll just enjoy that. Now, I will say this real quick. I have a buddy in Connecticut named Todd Mona. Todd Mona took my e-collar tone stuff and changed it a little bit. You should have Todd on as a follow-up. He does it a little bit different where I think the tone is an out from anywhere that he's at. And so he uses the tone as an out so that if the guy's in another room, beep, that dog will out and come back. He has a pretty neat way of doing it, being a neat little addition.
I want to add on to that. Gregg gets paid. It's a living for him to train people. You get paid. It's a living for you to train people. I get paid. It's a living for me to train people and dogs. We all get paid, and none of us are holding this information tight to our chest, right? Like if you're hanging out with a trainer that doesn't want you to go anywhere else, doesn't want to share any information, there's a problem with that. We are all make a living on training, and we all want more than anything to share good information with other people. None of us are to the point we're talking about tone today. None of us are stuck in the training that we learned 20 years ago. None of us are getting great information and holding it to our chest. I guess technically we're competitors, right? You have a podcast, we have a podcast, you train dogs, we train dogs. In a world gone by, that would have said, hey, we don't share any information with Eric. Eric doesn't share any information with us. That's bad juju. It's going to shut us all down. There's not enough dogs to go around. That's all bullshit. All three of us want to share information. We want to gain information. Gregg and I talk about this all the time. The best thing about the podcast is we learn something from everybody that comes on the podcast. Eric, you and I live thousands of miles away from each other. We talk to each other a couple times a week. Because of the information that we share, all three of us are good friends. Like, there's a lot to be said for sharing information. This kind of stuff touches me. I enjoy it. I like the fact that we can share this information, and it feels really good to be able to share it with people who aren't getting it. So thank you guys. I appreciate the relationship we all have.
Yeah, I love it. We're not gatekeepers. If you are a gatekeeper, you're fucked up. There's a guy over in Philadelphia that took my class and got into it so good that I think he just did one of his own private seminars that I'm sure had tone avoidance and everything in it. Awesome. I love it. Do it. There's plenty. I don't care. Train me out, take me out of business that way. Whatever. When I'm done with my seminars, I always tell people, if you got this, like if you really got this and you're moving forward and you go teach e-collar seminars and tone avoidance is in your seminar, I don't give a shit. Awesome. I'll give you my PowerPoint. My PowerPoint, I stole from Aaron. It's Aaron's PowerPoint. I just have tweaked it and changed it because of Bitework stuff. But there's this planet on the page one. It's a huge planet picture, and the thing on that's Aaron's. I took it from him. So I don't care. We don't care, right? Also, I can give you all the ingredients. It doesn't mean you can cook. So there's still work for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
One last thing I want to say real quick, guys. I know we're getting over time, but I want to go back to the leadership thing. I posted a thing on my Instagram the other day that a lot of people like to say that their dog, working or pet dog, is stubborn. And a lot of times stubbornness is actually just a fear of punishment for failure. And your leadership gives the dog the freedom, and by correcting them without talking to them, gives them the freedom to fail, knowing that they'll get corrected for things that they knowingly failed at, so they're always not nervous about just getting beat on and corrected all the time. So being a leader frees up your dog, and you'll see less stubbornness because the dog's not afraid when you're there that you're going to just constantly bitch at them and correct them. So think about not talking so much. Use them if you have to without talking. Correct the behavior. Those boundaries alone will change most people's interaction with their dog. And to giving credit, I stole that from a preacher who said that religion creates fear of failure, but Jesus gives you freedom to fail. So I like that one.
I like it.
Yeah,
yep.
I'm going to ingest that and then steal it for my own.
That'll be the Tawney method. No time at all.
Another one.
Hey, thank you guys. Appreciate everything. Eric, thanks for taking your morning out to be with us. Gregg, we're out of here. In the meantime,
Train hard.
And be safe.
But if he's running towards the road and I need him back, tone. There he is. He comes in, he gets rewarded. He understands that when he hears the tone, he comes back to us. That keeps Wilson out of trouble. Immediate response to that tone and returning back to the handler or the owner to get rewarded and to live to play another day is what makes the e-collar an amazing tool, and we love it. Does that mean I can't call him back by his name? Absolutely not. E-collar not being used. Let him roll around. Wilson, here. He absolutely understands how to come to his name. But if he's a quarter of a mile away and there's loud noises, or he's really in drive to chase a squirrel, or he's really close to getting himself caught up in that tractor, it's important.
Hey, once again, Police Canine Radio is brought to you by our friends at INUKSHUK. INUKSHUK is the food that we use for our dogs. It's the food that we use for our police dogs, pet dogs, and we have several police agencies in our area that are using INUKSHUK as their primary food for all of their police dogs. Additionally, we have several pet dogs that are using INUKSHUK daily, and we have seen massive transformations in dogs that were having a hard time holding weight, having a hard time with their coats, and just having a hard time being healthy. Several dogs have transferred over to INUKSHUK and are thriving now, and we can't say enough good things about that food. If you're looking for a new food for your dog, or you want to find a healthier way to reward your dog and feed your dog daily, we definitely recommend INUKSHUK for your police dog or your pet dog.